What's up, YouTube? Brochosaurus here, back with another video, and today we're going to be talking about Path of Exile 2 and what it did that Blizzard was not allowed to do. Let's go ahead and dive in. I'm really excited to take a look at this video.
Let's go! Today we've got to talk about one of the biggest launches of the year, of course, Path of Exile 2, and how it's doing what Diablo 4 did
Loving
not.
the
And
game,
I bring
by
that
the
up
way.
as an angle,
Loving
not
it.
to bash Blizzard, right? That's not really the point. The point is that products cannot escape how they were made, or in this case, how they were shipped. Path of Exile 2 is a game that is getting so much right. It's managed to sidestep so much of what torpedoed Diablo 4's at least initial online sentiment.
And I think what the biggest component here is that why it's shadowing, or not shadowing, why Blizzard is being shadowed by this game is Blizzard works more on a corporate level of side of things, and that's kind of how they have to do things. They have to abide by the corporate level, and a lot of things probably get rejected along the way of making content and video games and things like that. Whereas, I mean, like, they kind of got to play it in the safe mode, right? They can't really go beyond the scope of safe and take riskier roads in being creative. Whereas Path of Exile 2, the company that makes that game, they're not quite on the same level, corporate level, as Blizzard, so they are able to take the more riskier approaches in developing games. And I think that when you put 2 and 2 together, like side by side, and you're allowed to take those risks and be more creative with game development in this instance, you're going to come out with probably a better result. And that's exactly what I think is happening here with PoE 2.
And when we go into the detail of the creation of these games, it gets even better. So this is a big one, an important one, and one that we're going to put in context, of course supported by today's sponsor. We're going to help you transform doom scrolling into skills you can be proud of, and for me, that means righting a little bit of a wrong from the past. It's brilliant.org/bellularnews, and for me, they are a healthy, fulfilling habit. That's because they're all about learning by doing across thousands of lessons in maths, data science, programming, and AI, and it's all with their gorgeous site and app. And what sets them apart is just how tactile and interactive everything is, which is the complete opposite of the school system that I went through. I used to love science, but I just couldn't get engaged in advanced maths topics, actually. And to be honest, it's been a little bit of an insecurity, a bit of unfinished business. And that's why I'm enjoying their maths pathway, especially geometry. It's funny, spatial problem solving has always been like a little bit tricky for me. And of course, that's where Brilliant's interactive visualizations are just perfect. It's a real good foundational skill, of course, the sort of thing that's useful across just everything, but it's so often not taught well. And of course, this is just one pathway. Now, personally, I use the app. I love the app's layout. The illustrations and the UX are just delightful. You can just feel the passion behind it, and
yeah, it probably feels a lot more fun too.
My phone's something that works for me rather than distract me. So you can do the same. You can turn the doom scrolling into a daily learning habit today at brilliant.org/bellularnews, where you'll get a 30-day free trial and 20% off an annual plan, which is something you won't regret. But first, we got to check in with the numbers. They are mighty. This is a hell of a success. So
I know as soon as this launched on early access for Steam alone, I know that they sold 1 million copies.
Steam peaked with 578k players, placing this in the all-time top 20. It also beat Path of Exile 1's highest ever concurrency, which was 350k in July 2024. So yeah, old game, but no slouch. And of course, it's not even free to play yet. All of this represents at least $30 of revenue, so yes, this is a lot of money for the company. And through the weekend, it of course was topping Steam's bestseller list.
That's
but
what,
it's not only selling
30
in
mil?
Steam. As an example, my PC, well, it must have got access to my Twitter feed because my PC rapidly unalived itself, so I've been playing on PS5. It actually hit rank 6 on the PlayStation and Xbox stores, and much like Diablo 4, my god, this game feels amazing to play on the controller. It's incredible. Now, the launch was good and not good, but for good reason. Grinding Gear reached 1 million early access redemptions.
Exactly.
Yeah, redemptions, there's a few little asterisks there that I'll get into later.
Yeah, I guess it was 1 million copies total on early access, and redemptions doesn't quite mean copies sold. So there was probably some keys given out for free there.
They hit that before the launch, and they knew the servers would be a problem. They actually had way more success than they thought, than they forecasted, which is almost surprising to me. It just seems like this was inevitably going to be a humongous event. I guess they modeled for humongous and got double humongous. Anyway, the servers were completely rammed. A last-minute crash that hit the majority of users was found, so they delayed the launch, but eventually, the game came out, and just about all was well. Over on Twitch, well over 1 million people were watching, and even SteamDB broke. And that's pretty well, because it was literally just people checking how the launch was doing. Let's talk about numbers and money, though. This is a little...
I was lucky enough, I had to work during that period, during launch, so I didn't even get to play it till like midnight, 1 a.m. By the time I got home and got on.
Little bit of bro math, but it actually...
So I didn't have issues with servers.
Does have a point. Path of Exile 2 is pulling higher than Helldivers 2 in terms of its concurrence on Steam.
Well, of course it
and
is.
whenever it's dipping down into the troughs, it still is over 200k. It's doing incredibly. Now, even, yeah, you look at Helldivers 2's launch, it's got its strange server problems that make the chart look really quite funny, but the point is, both are selling extremely well, and there are similar launch spikes. Now, Path of Exile 2 beat Helldivers 2 to the 1 million mark because it hit 1 million access codes redeemed before launch. Helldivers 2 took 3 days to hit 1 million sales. 6 weeks post-launch, Bloomberg reported 8 million Helldivers 2 sales, and by 12 weeks, we got a number of 12 million Helldivers 2 sales, with about 60% being on PC. Now, I don't think Path of Exile 2 will overall hit as broadly as Helldivers did, but I actually do bring it up for really for a reason here, for a point. Helldivers 2 was a surprise. That's why it was such a viral, word of mouth hit. And in many ways with Path of Exile 2, it's achieving the same. Grinding Gear Games had expectations for this. Those expectations were probably modeled off how many people were playing Path of Exile 1, right? But what we've seen is viral word of mouth carrying Path of Exile 2. And that's because...
The thing that really sold me on the game, and I know this is going to sound a little superficial as far as probably the player base of those who play PoE from the first PoE, because I wasn't a PoE player at all. I mainly played Diablo and WoW, and much along the lines of Blizzard games. So I didn't really want to get into PoE 1 at the time because it was so far along already, and I heard there was such a learning gap with trying to figure out and learn the game already this late into it. So seeing PoE 2 come up and then watching the trailer is what really sold me on that, and I wanted to jump on it this time.
Well, it's actually managed to do something that is altogether more ambitious, risky, and impressive. We live in a world where
trailer
many
was
games
amazing.
don't earn their marketing copy. Path of Exile 2 does, so it's billed as a next-generation ARPG, and it really is. See, here's the thing. I've realized I actually don't like ARPGs in the traditional sense. Once the sugar rush ends, I am just incapable of caring. The gear doesn't work for me. But Path of Exile 2 actually does click. Another one that clicked for me is No Rest for the Wicked. Both are...
I think a part of that is because, like with Diablo 4, it was loot drop, loot drop, loot drop, loot drop. You were just being bombarded with loot drops. And in PoE 2, it's not like that. You don't get loot drops after every kill. You have to actually really farm to get a decent loot drop.
Are refreshingly different action RPGs, and that's what Grinding Gear seems to have pulled off. And it's why I brought up Helldivers, because it was a big surprise, right? That's why it sold so much better than Arrowhead, even optimistically modeled. So whenever you hear a game being billed as, this is the Skyrim of that, or the Dark Souls of this, you often roll your eyes and think,
Diablo-like.
Oh, really? But no, in this case, actually, kind of is like that. Path of Exile 2 is slower, it's more methodical, it's got a dodge roll, and a dodge roll that feels pretty damn good. And that's allowed Grinding Gear to design the combat differently. It's slow.
I've noticed, with my character, I think I'm a mage. I think it's a mage. You have to kind of hit and roll, hit and roll, hit and roll, hit and roll in this game, and it seems to be working for me. But yeah, the dodge does feel really well.
Lower, it's harder. It actually feels way more engaging and involved to me than just a big numbers go brr. The actual...
Oh yeah, you definitely have to take your time with this, and it's a lot more. It's definitely harder to play than Diablo.
Feeling of skill and mastery is really there. That's why I'm continuing to play it. It's why I liked the bit of No Rest for the Wicked that I played. And most importantly for today, it's not what people tend to expect from the ARPG genre. And I've got to wonder if that positive word of mouth, people saying, yeah, this is an ARPG, but it's actually different. It's trying more. The boss fights are actually worth doing just for being good boss fights in a game. That is a type of word of mouth, and being ambitious with the design of this game that actually seems to be moving the needle and making this hit harder than grinding gear even expected. And when we look at both it and Diablo 4 and try to learn lessons, it actually gets more interesting. Both are games that are basically channeling a hell of a lot of Diablo 2, and they are both games that try to slow the pace way down and amp up the meaning. That's what D4 tried to do with its launch, but well, it didn't really work that well. Now, there are many parts of
And I think a lot of that, like I said at the beginning of this video, has to do with the corporate side of things and taking riskier approaches and being creative on the development end.
Before that I think are pretty excellent, but it didn't really land its design. And post-launch, it's basically succeeded by turning itself into a far more fast-paced game, essentially borrowing lessons from Diablo 3, which means that, yeah, there is a new Diablo game to play, but it's not really one that's daring, that's next generation, right? Whereas here, Path of Exile 2, it has also tried to be a little bit slower, a little bit more methodical, but it's actually managed to stick the landing and succeed, and that is a humongous achievement. And in the biggest picture, that's because, let's just say you're somebody who loved Elden Ring, and tens of millions of people are in that category. Well, Diablo 4 would have very little to offer you. They do not play anyway similar. Path of Exile 2 can credibly target that market and get
I can see that,
non-ARPG
especially with boss
grinders
fights.
and that means that this could truly expand the genre. I don't want to shock you, but expectations sort of do matter, and while expectations for this were high, it was also well built to handle things not being perfect. Diablo 4 launched at a big full premium price, with, of course, a premium early access on top of that, and that meant that players were rightly scathing whenever things just did not feel that well thought out. PoE 2, though, is overtly an early access game, right? That's the whole point, and the core of it kind of just goes like this. The world is rich, big Diablo 2 vibes, it's immersive, it's dense, the gameplay is absolutely
I think it
outstanding.
looks
The
almost
bosses are
like Diablo
professionally
4.
outstanding for the genre, unlike, say, Diablo 4, where a lot of people were kind of disappointed by that. And then, of course, there's Path of Exile's home turf, Buildcraft. Frankly, it terrifies me. It's nearly limitless, but it's that in a way that's all about the player.
That's cool, though.
Expression. Just looking at clips, looking at GIFs on Twitter, the amount of cool shit that people are building is genuinely kind of inspiring. However, it does share one thing with Diablo 4, and that is not a lot of praise for loot. For now, what I understand is basically whenever you level up, the vendors will refresh, and actually quite often you'll be getting your better sources of gear from those vendors.
Yeah, from the vendors.
Earlier level up flow, and it's kind of funny because.
But you know the thing that I appreciate more in PoE 2 than I did Diablo 4 was you're not being bombarded with loot like you were in Diablo 4. You are still getting loot, but it's not as abundant. And a lot of the Diablo 4 loot was trash anyways. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, you were farming for hours for decent loot.
Because D4 got loot wrong with launch. But, right, the thing that matters here the most is the core gameplay and the buildcraft, and those absolutely seem to be outweighing the loot concerns. Plus, it's early access. That means players have got reasonable expectations. Right now, the game has got half of its campaign. You basically complete it again in hard mode, and then you're into the end game. And it's even funny the way that happened, because Path of Exile 2 initially started off in 2019 as a new campaign for Path of Exile. Basically, things escalated, and now we're here. And by the time they hit 2024, they realized something. Well, we shouldn't do the rest of the campaign right now. We need to do a launch with a full-ass endgame. And that's exactly what they did. Here's a quote from them. This is them talking about their recent development. Part of what we're trying to do with early access is get the game right, and I think that if we had scaled endgame down, then we wouldn't really be getting the true reflection of what the game would be. And that, folks, is the kicker, the big thing. Diablo 4 did not have any of that, and I again do not say this to bash.
And I stopped playing Diablo 4 immediately after I finished the game. Okay, I will say immediately. I did farm a little bit after in the next difficulty, but I couldn't keep going. It just didn't pique my interest one bit, and I didn't give a fuck about the gear at that point.
Blizzard developers. Seriously, I don't. Most people are good and want to do good, and as developers, they would have killed for a launch like Path of Exile 2, one that had reasonably set expectations, that wasn't asking for so much money even though core parts of the game were kind of ill thought out, one that's basically designed to make the game over time as best as it can be for their players with their players. And even sticking within ARPGs, we have another success story from this year in Last Epoch. It did just that. But for the biggest picture, we need to look at another game that's similar in a way, and that's Baldur's Gate 3. Obviously, totally different games, but it released with just a fraction of its content in early access, and that gave Larian the finances, feedback, and the time that they needed to make what is easily one of the world's best ever role-playing games. And why? Well, because that was slowly made with their community over time. And that is exactly what Grinding Gear have set themselves up to do here. Of course, like Larian, their one thing, the literal mission of the company is ARPGs. And that gets me to the real point. Larian and Grinding Gear had experience and control. What did Blizzard Entertainment have? They had scale, chaos, pressure, and misery. So whenever I
Corporate control. Yes.
say that you should care about how your games are made, this is why. Because we want them to actually be good. Diablo 4 is a really strange project. It started off as an over-the-shoulder action game, then it was rebooted, and then all spare resources were poured into finishing the damn thing. All, of course, to hit its big release target. And from the CEO's vantage point, it of course worked. D4 was an astounding success, one of the games of all time, the fastest-selling Blizzard game in history. 12 million players within 2 months. And of those millions, how many purchased the far more expensive Early Access Edition? Probably quite a few. I mean, within 6 days, it generated $666 million of revenue, and that, folks, is stonks. Leaks suggest $1 billion in revenue by September 2024, with $150 million coming from microtransactions up to that point. Yet,
Fucking
for a
hate
lot of that time span,
microtransactions.
the players were not happy. Even though those amazing numbers were there,
I mean, I guess I don't have an issue with people buying microtransactions. Me personally, I just don't want to waste my money on them. And I think putting things behind paywalls is terrible, terrible, terrible idea and way to condone your game.
the game was clearly not ready. Core systems did not stand to reason. Their foundational gameplay hypothesis of an open world full of objectives that you would basically re-clear every season was almost immediately proven to be wrong and boring. I mean, basically it was saying, would you like the structure of an Ubisoft game and every season you can clear the map again? No, obviously that was never going to work. Fundamental aspects of itemization were broken. Now, credit where it's due. The Diablo 4 team have actually busted their asses to fix as many parts of that game.
And I actually only play these type of games for the story. Once the story is over, I'm done playing.
As they could. But the point is, they could have delayed that game, and we could have got a Diablo 4 that was substantially better, and that dodged so many of those player concerns. But we didn't get that. Again, $666 million of revenue in 6 days. They obviously needed to ship it when they were going to ship it, and with a scale like that, the dev team are not the people who are making the calls. They're not calling the shots. This game, Path of Exile 2, is early access. Right now, it costs under half the price of D4's base edition. And on top of that, many longtime Path of Exile players got it for free. And the way that worked is pretty neat. If you've ever purchased a top edition supporter pack, or if you've spent over the lifetime of your account $480, you get access to it. This matters. That is actually goodwill. That is money from some of their players of the deepest pockets that they just sort of said, nah, we'll just give it to you. Keep on playing Path of Exile.
And that's real dedication to a fan base right there, honestly. That means a lot to a community to see their transactions or microtransactions get reimbursed to them in a way that matters.
They've also ensured that they're not killing PoE 1. PoE 1 was amazingly supported for years and years and years and years, building up goodwill. Meanwhile, with Blizzard, what happened? Well, Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls was kind of killed in the grave. They sort of abandoned expansions when they actually could have got lots of success there. The point isn't that one team is perfect and the other one makes nothing but mistakes. No, in both cases, you've got developers who will make mistakes and will want to learn from their launch. With Diablo 4, it is a humongously staffed behemoth that is rigid, hard to move, and is not under that team's explicit control. With Path of Exile, they've overtly planned for open development. Now, sure, the network team may have needed some crisis meetings, and yeah, we're seeing totally busted combos being nerfed, but nothing close to the, oh dear, our foundational design hypothesis that we basically didn't beta.
You're going to have that, though. You're going to have things that need nerfed, things that need fixed, that you're not going to see until they launch and, hundreds of thousands of people play them and address those issues, or they have found those issues in the game and report them.
The test at all appears to be wrong and the players are not happy, which is what would have happened inside Blizzard, and must have stung. And that's the power of designing for early access. No rushing to hit the quarterly earnings, quite the opposite. PoE 2 was in fact delayed. See a lot of that account stuff, microtransactions and everything. Well, the game was delayed because they basically had to re-architect all of their server and account stuff to make that work, because there's like shared microtransactions. And the game,
I think one of the biggest things about that too, with this company that created PoE 2, Grinding Gear Games, they're open and honest about what they're doing. I don't know if you guys remember the game The Day Before and the company that developed that, which was a fucking joke, by the way. How they lied and lied and lied and lied and lied to the community, and then finally came out and said, yeah, we fucked up, and then continued to fuck up and lie to the community. It's not like that with Grinding Gear Games. And everybody hates that company, right? Nobody trusts that company now. I'm pretty sure that game did absolutely fucking horrific in sales and everything like that. In fact, I'm pretty sure most of those people refunded their money back. What my point is, with PoE 2 and Grinding Gear Games, they have been open and honest about, how the basically the layout and the roadmap for this game is going to go. And if they have issues arise, they confront those in pretty much meetings and publish those on social media for you guys to see, which I think is really important, because they're treating you like an adult, right? They're talking to you like an adult and being mature about it and open and honest, and people can respect that versus being lied to.
Games are going to be running concurrently as well. Grinding Gear know that PoE 2 is different in a way that some people will not like. That actually means that PoE 2 has a reason to exist, unlike a certain other sequel from a certain other company that's probably in both of our minds right now. But that's not the final point. We're going to have to talk about scale, because the numbers here, I don't want to say they're shocking, but my god, do they prove a point. If you go onto LinkedIn right now, you will see that Grinding Gear Games have got between 51 and 200 employees. Quickly Googling around, I've seen it being reported as like 140, 150, and I'm sure there will be more people in the credits.
Much smaller company.
But that's a fraction of the Diablo team. In fact, right, I have it from sources as of last year. The
brings me back to my original point. Corporate, smaller company, more creative and able to take those higher risks, being told what to do, and, limited on their amount of creativity and probably budget as well.
Diablo was the single largest game team at Blizzard Entertainment, and at one point, I know World of Warcraft, in and around that time, was about 550 people, so you likely had north of 600 as the core dev team of Diablo 4, and that comes out as a bit of a troubled project, even though it sells a lot, makes money up front. We then look at this game, a game that is not burdened by having to find work for 600 to 1,000 people to do, because what the hell? How are you going to make a game that way that's actually good and crafted? Okay, I'm going to play a lot more Path of Exile. We will keep you up to date in this story, because it's one of the good ones. And sticking with good ones, watch this next. It's really fun. It's basically GOG giving a big slap back to Blizzard and winning so much free PR. I think you'll find it fun.
So basically, what I'm getting from that video is basically what I said at the beginning of this video, is Blizzard is more of a corporate ran and driven company, and limited on their creativity and budget and what they can do for a game, whereas Path of Exile's Grinding Gear Games is way smaller in proportion and has that ability to take those risks and be more creative with developing their game.
Hey guys, if you like the video, make sure you head over to the page, hit that like button, scroll over, smash that subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get notified for future video drops, and I will see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.